So let's get started. Welcome to Zero to Serverless. We're going to get fast and furious. And as part of this talk, we will see how to deploy serverless in an open source environment in just 60 seconds. How many of you are using serverless or planning on using serverless now? And keep your hand up if that's only on the AWS or the cloud. Yeah, okay, so a bit of a mix. We're going to focus on that open source element today and show you how easy it is. So we will get to serverless, and it will take us 60 seconds. You can time me, see how well I do. And then rather than give you an introduction to the talk in a kind of a standard way, what I want to do is break it down into the values of the project, which we've developed and have helped the community and the project grow, and then show you how that relates to various bits of information that you'll find useful. We're going to actually get into my Monzo account. I'm going to give you access. That's a bank account in the UK. I'm going to use the API to do something with my money. So I hope you'll take part in that. And then at the end, I'll show you how you can get involved in the project and how you can try it out. For those of you that are using serverless in the cloud, there was a survey done, about 350 people. And what they wanted to know is, are you using open source serverless, or a platform that can be installed on your own machines or your own infrastructure? And if not, are you planning to use it in the next 18 months? And as you can see, this is rising, and that growth is actually larger than the growth of people planning to use serverless in the cloud. So on that basis, I want to tell you about the CNCF serverless landscape. The Cloud Native Computing Foundation is part of the Linux Foundation, and it exists to curate technologies, give them a neutral home. And in the corner just there, you can see the bigger landscape, which is absolutely huge now. And it has everything from containers to security to all of the different public clouds. And this area of serverless got so popular that it broke out into its own landscape, and that's what we can see here. Now, these are platforms that you may have used where it's completely locked down, but it's very easy to get started, completely hosted on the cloud. And these are the ones that are installable, and that's the difference. Now, this is also an area that's grown very much in the last 12, 18 months. And you can see OpenFaaS is there. Chad spoke earlier about FN. That's here as well. So let's look at OpenFaaS. This is a project that I work on. And I actually started this about 2 years ago today. And I had this idea while I had a full-time job of hacking with containers and Alexa. I tried out AWS Lambda, and I really liked that simplicity. But I had a few frustrations with zip files and editing in a web editor. And I was used to this container native workflow that some of you might be used to, where you push code and then things build in your CI system. So I tried things out, different combinations, and I got a small framework together called Faas, and I was able to run my code in containers on my existing infrastructure. It turned out that it was really popular as an idea, and other people wanted to be involved. So this is me at DockerCon in the keynote back in, I think, May last year, and I was telling everyone about Faas. 5,000 people there. And we were looking at how to run serverless in containers for that portability. Since then, it became so big that I just couldn't sustain it in my free time, going home, neglecting my family, the dishes and things like that. I had to really find a way of making it sustainable. And this is where VMware came in. They're one of the companies that I spoke to, and gave me the opportunity to come and lead a team there full time. We actually have one of my team, Bart, at the front, who you can see speak tomorrow. So now VMware is getting behind the project. It's a really big company with a lot of experience in this area, and we're going from strength to strength. There's an endless list of production users and people kicking the tires, and I hope that will help you relate how this can work for you as well when we look at the use cases. And then we just won the second BOSI Award about a month ago from InfoWorld for Best Cloud Computing Software in open source. So things are going really well, and this is the project we're going to focus on today. Now, when you compare open source serverless to what you were using perhaps in the cloud, one of the key things here is it needs to be easy to use, right? Because there's a very high bar set already. So OpenFaaS focuses on being easy to use, why people like it. It allows you a bit more freedom than you may be used to. You can actually run any code you want. So any binary, whether it's on Windows or Linux, can be containerized and then run as a function without many changes. You can actually run that anywhere. And when I say anywhere, that means any cloud, any compute that you have. The main focus now is Kubernetes, but you can also run this in Docker Swarm, HashiCorp Nomad, even on AWS, Fargate. Now, one requirement that we're seeing more and more in enterprise is to be able to run on 2 clouds at the same time, multi-cloud. You just can't do that with vendor functions. There's no way. With OpenFaaS, you can today. And then you can get to any scale you want. So just because there's an element of you managing this and installing a platform doesn't mean that you have any caps. You can use auto-scaling in the cloud and many other ways to sort of get this capacity. So the key thing is, rather than perhaps being limited to 100 megabytes zip file as your upload for your function, you can go to multiple gigabytes. It's really important for some of our users that do machine learning. I don't know if anybody's tried their hand at that, but your models can be quite large, and there's just no way of getting them into cloud functions. So this is OpenFaaS. Now let's get serverless in 60 seconds. So what I did earlier today is I went over to DigitalOcean, and this could be AWS, it could be Google Compute Engine, and I just created a cluster with a slider bar, and that's now provisioned me 2 machines. And what I'll now do is go over to the OpenFaaS homepage, and this is called Helm chart. Has anyone heard of a Helm chart? Okay, so Helm chart's like packaging. It's a bit like apt-to-get. What we'd do is we'll generate a password because we want to be secure by default. And I'm currently pointing at that cluster. It's created me a password. I'm just going to run a single command that we use this chart definition, and it will now create all of the objects in my Kubernetes cluster, that blank cluster, and we can watch this, and in a few seconds it will be up and running. So we just got all ones here. When that goes to 1, we get 12 seconds. So that's it. We're now serverless. What we can now do is get that password that was generated, and open up the UI that's deployed. Okay, so the username is admin, and we have that long secure password. What we'll now see is the OpenFaaS UI. I'm not sure how big that is for you, but you have this button here to deploy a function. So I'm not going to write one here. I'm going to deploy one from the function store. So part of the promise of serverless is that reusability, that you can create these functions, put them somewhere, and other people can make use of them. Maybe you can even sell them. The one I want to show you will turn a black and white photo into color using machine learning. So if we just have a quick look for London black and white photos. So that's the OpenFaaS UI. Once your functions are deployed, you'll be able to see what's there, and that's just a nice user interface for you. There's a command line interface we can make use of as well. So let's pick out a black and white photo, and what we'll do is we'll put that into the function. It's going to download this URL by putting it into the body. When I hit invoke, that function will run in that Kubernetes cluster, and in about 4 to 5 seconds, we'll get the color image downloaded back onto the disk. And this works with any function that you deploy in OpenFaaS. And so there we go. The color image from black and white photo. And there's literally a very expensive process that you'd normally have to go through to get that sort of result with someone colorizing it manually, completely automated. Now you can deploy other functions here as well, like machine learning. There's also stuff to, have I been pwned, to see if your password's secure enough, has it been used in a breach before? But now let's have a quick look at how we'd actually build our own functions, if you may be wondering. So I said we'll frame this talk around the values of OpenFaaS. The values are developer first, which means focusing on you guys and your experience. There's a command line interface. There's the UI I showed you, the function store. We're trying to make it as easy as possible to use. It's operator friendly. That means it's lightweight. And it's community centric. So we have a big community of people contributing and taking part in the project. So when we say developer first, it means it should get out of your way. Right? We don't want to create additional friction for you. This is a Visual Studio Code. I'm a big fan of this. It's quite a new editor. And you can see here we can use the CLI directly from within the IDE. We've got a small function there that just goes off and finds out how many people are in space. Right? It's very easy to use from one central position. That combined with the function store means that you can build an application very, very quickly. There's a number of languages that are very easy to use. These are the ones that were rated top in DigitalOcean's trends survey that they did in the last quarter. They said, what are the programming languages people are using with containers? And these were the top. So we have a template that you can use with the command line interface to scaffold this for you, and then you just write your code. And this is what it looks like. At the top, you would type in Faas CLI new, put the language you want, like Python 3, and then the name of the function. At that point in time, it will scaffold out the handler for you and a way for you to specify what requirements you want. Now, it might be that you've got a package JSON with Node.js. Maybe you've got a project file with .NET. And then, this is the magic part. When you type Faas up, we take your handler and combine it with a best practices Docker file for that language so that you don't have to, hi Chad, you don't have to think about how do I optimize this, how do I make it secure. So it will be running as a non-root user. It will be very much tightened up for you. That Docker image is immutable and it's frozen in time. So with AWS, where you may be used to creating the zip file, here we're creating a Docker image that can be used with all the native tooling, pushed into a registry, and from there it can be deployed. So when you get a new version of your code, again, you create a new image and push that up. And it means that you can go backwards and forwards between the versions that you published. Now, one of the things that's quite popular with serverless is being able to chain functions together. One of the earliest things that I did back at DockerCon was this example. It's called the fan club. And the idea was that this is one of the people who's done it recently, is you would start the GitHub repo, and GitHub will send you a webhook. And then I wanted to do a chain of things. I wanted a workflow where I'd download their avatar from the GitHub CDN. I would apply a Polaroid transformation on it and then tweet it out. And so this is an example. But the way that it's been done is there's one function that is controlling it all. It's like a director pattern. That one function comes into existence. It will call the other functions. And at the end, that call is completed. Okay. Rather than having to manage another concept of this is a workflow, much like I think Oracle does this, you're able to program it in your chosen programming language rather than having to learn yet another concept. Now that's how you can do workflows and chaining. Now once you've got a couple of functions and you want to deploy them together, remember I showed you the colorize, it's probably not much good on its own. Maybe you want some kind of integration with Twitter or with another service. You can put them into a YAML file, and here you get to specify the language that you're going to use, what the folder is that it sits in. Because we're using Docker images, we can put a version after each element. So like 1.0, 2.0, you can even use the git char. Okay, and then rather than storing data in environmental variables, we're actually able to use secure secrets in Kubernetes. And so here, for the one I'm going to show you later, we've got the bank API key is installed there. Anybody that's worked in the enterprise is probably used to HTTP proxies. Again, there's full support for that. Because of my past career of having to deal with that, I wanted to make it as easy as possible for people. Now, you can actually support any language. I said that, any binary, right. So Grace Hopper, when she joined the US Navy back, I believe, in the 50s, this is one of the first languages that her team created, COBOL. And this is actually an OpenFaaS function written in COBOL, and you can run that on your cluster. This is what it looks like. So we have those templates for those popular languages, but when you want to go a little bit off-piste, it's very easy. This is a very minimal Docker file. Essentially, you add one component into it, you say what is the code you want to run, and you're good. And everything else works exactly the same, the scaling, the metrics, etc. Now, this is a particle physicist, Lucas Heinrich at CERN, and he actually thinks this is really great. He said, one thing I really like about OpenFaaS is the approach to use a custom image. Right? And that's what I've just shown you, that idea of using COBOL or anything that you already have. And they're interested in Fortran. So let's have a look at some of the end users. I think it was Maria was asking me about this in the hallway. So, well, is anyone actually using it? There's a number of companies here. I'm just going to go into a couple. The first one is Bulletproof, which is a company that's come about in the UK after GDPR. And what they're trying to do is help you with your vulnerability scanning, being able to take your environment, your code, and use OpenFaaS and the tools that they already know and would use for this, containerize them, and because you can run anything as an OpenFaaS function, they're able to use that, scale it up, and as they get more customers, they can add more computers into the cluster, and this works really well for them. Running custom code on a cloud platform is much more limiting. You tend to be limited to whatever Node.js version they're currently at. Right, we're already able to run with Node 10, right, the LTS version, or even you can go to the next gen version with OpenFaaS. That's really important for Bulletproof, and then it gives them a single pane of glass for all of their tooling. Vision Banco are in Paraguay, and it's actually Patricio that reached out to me, and he tweeted this in June. He said, we've just switched one of our production banking functions over to OpenFaaS. And I was thinking, okay, really? And fortunately, it's actually been very uneventful. And it's been so successful for them that they've moved more and more of their functions, and now their whole home banking service is running on OpenFaaS. Previously, they were using Java and a lot of enterprise tooling. They were having to firefight it a lot. And so one thing that gave them reassurance was the built-in metrics in OpenFaaS. This is a Grafana dashboard here. It's just showing the throughput of the system. And so that was something that was very popular for them, and they're trying to now get more of their legacy technology over to this. We're actually going to talk at KubeCon, so if any of you are going to be there, you can hear a bit more about the use case. And this, again, is one of those examples where open source really shines because they need to be completely on-premise. They can't have anything in a public cloud. So even their source control is running in GitLab instance. Now, I said the second value was being community-centric. Sunshine there. These are 150 contributors that have added code and have contributed in some way to the OpenFaaS project. I know there's at least a couple of people at the front here, Bart from my team at VMware and Ed, who's now a core contributor in the project, have really helped shape and move the pace of what we can do. Now, you may wonder with that many people how you can have a sense of being in the same boat. Well, actually, we have regular Zoom calls. This is Ed presenting. I've got a nice capture of him there about a provider he wrote to help people on AWS use OpenFaaS without having to learn about Kubernetes. We'll also have meetings with the maintainers and meet up at conferences. And this is one of the things I really like, is people like Ed will take time off from work to come and be here and to support the project and answer questions. Right? And the fun part is when we get to send people swag. I actually have some T-shirts at the front if you want one later. And I've got Ken here, who's helped with the function store over in Japan. And he says it's a bit like Christmas when he received his shipment. So there's a real sense of being involved in this together, of all pushing in the same direction. And it does take a lot of work to build up to that many contributors. This is our latest bit of swag designed by somebody over in San Diego who found out about the project at a digital agency and really just wanted to contribute. This is the mission patch, like a NASA mission patch, but for Team Serverless. The third value is being operator friendly. And what this means is that OpenFaaS shouldn't give your ops guys a heart attack when they realize it bundles Kafka and now needs 12 nodes just to run that. You know, it's very lightweight. All of the components that it's using at cloud native, remember that landscape I showed you at the beginning? The components come from there, so we know they play well together. They're loosely coupled. They're designed for the cloud, and they're all open source. Now, we're able to deploy in 60 seconds on Kubernetes, which is one of the platforms that a lot of people are having to learn. You may have an objective this year to learn Kubernetes. Well, fortunately, OpenFaaS is able to actually abstract a lot of that away from you, so you can still leverage the benefits without paying the cost of learning it in and out. And it's lightweight. So this is a Raspberry Pi cluster. I did a talk with Scott Hanselman in February back in London, and we deployed OpenFaaS on there with Kubernetes. This is one from the community that I really like. So anybody here use Kubernetes? Right, so hopefully this is not too alien. I'll try to explain it sort of in bigger chunks. What I'm trying to show you here is we have some traffic coming into our cluster. This might be your API gateway in AWS. Call it an ingress controller or load balancer. Once that comes into your cluster, it will hit the OpenFaaS API gateway. And there, every function that you've deployed on the far side will get its own route by default. So there's no extra hassle configuring routes. You just get it automatically. Metrics are collected in something called Prometheus that allows you to create very rich dashboards. And we use that data to be able to scale your functions up when they're getting a lot of demand. You can also scale them to 0 to save you money and scale them back up again. And that streaming is a queuing system that's very lightweight, written in Go, and that sits in your cluster to allow you to run your tasks in the background. So if you're going to colorize images, perhaps, I don't know, you have them coming from Twitter and 1,000 people tweeted, you don't want to break your cluster. You may want to do it asynchronously. And so the message can come in, can be processed when you have capacity, and then returned. Yeah. And something that's quite popular in Kubernetes at the moment is this idea of a custom resource. So if you're using kubectl, then you can actually go kubectl get function, inspect it, and it's our operator that behind the scenes does the work for you. What does that mean? Well, if you have a pod in Kubernetes and you're used to using Kubernetes, that's basically your bread and butter. So because we're using pods, it means that you can use all your existing tooling for looking at logs, for security and vulnerability analysis. Okay, I think that's quite an important part of the project. So OpenFaaS uses normal stuff. There's nothing exotic here. And it's all open source. Some people often ask about events. How could you connect to events? Well, one of the things that we did with OpenFaaS was to try to create that architecture where you've got these big blocks that tend to do one thing really well. It goes back to those Unix principles Chad was talking about going way back in time. Well, the Unix fathers, if you like, they founded these ideas of keeping things simple, only doing one job, and having bounded responsibilities. So the OpenFaaS API gateway, rather than us going into every part of the code and adding Kafka, adding Redis and MQTT and cron, that happens in a separate component called an event connector. And then that is able to call into your code. So when you want to add another trigger or another type of event, you don't have to break anything. All can be written in a separate component that will make use of the functions you've got deployed to look at what are the topics they care about through some metadata, and it can make those connections for you. Right? And that's meant that in a very short period of time, we've been able to cover a lot of the bases. So this is how you can use events with OpenFaaS. You can find out more in the documentation. The third case study I wanted to tell you about is at BT. Again, when you run an open source project, people don't often tell you that they're using the project until there's something that's going wrong, or perhaps they've got to a certain level with it. It was about 9 months that Joost Noppen had been using OpenFaaS, and he said, look, I've been using it, we're becoming really reliant on it. And so we started chatting to each other, finding out what he needed, make some tweaks in the project, and tell him some of the new features that have been added. They're very reliant on it at the moment. He actually told me that he has a KPI or a scorecard, a kind of metric that every piece of software that they develop in their team has to run on OpenFaaS, and there's a checkbox for it, which I thought was really cool. And the way they do this is he's one of a small team of 4 people, and they have 100 research engineers. The research that they do is meant to help customers out in the field, like you and I. The Wi-Fi's failed here, and I'm tethering on my phone. Perhaps he could help with that in some way. So what they'll do is they'll write their research, package it and deploy it in their OpenFaaS cluster. And when it's graduated, it then gets packaged up, as you can see here, to have the deliverable, a token, some stateful data, and then I'll add a front end, and that will be a product. So I'm hoping to see more in that space from them, and they're also using it with the wider BT research to provide tooling. So he told me about a service that provided where you can send one of your Java projects to it, and it will analyze what jar files are needed and build up the manifest for you, which I thought was quite cool. Again, BT need to run completely on-premise. With OpenFaaS, it's up to you whether you want to go 100% on your own hardware, 100% in the cloud, or anywhere in the middle. We tried to make that as easy as possible. So Ivan, we talked about the operators. Ivan is an operator. He's a trainer in London, and he does a lot with Kubernetes. One of the things he set up for his customers was this ability to push code and then get an endpoint out the other end. And he says, in essence, serverless is about doing that. It's not just about the compute, right? So serverless is kind of going beyond just the Lambda function, just that handler. It's how you build it, deliver it, and manage the change. Tomorrow, Bart, my colleague, is going to talk a bit more about that change management through the idea of Getups. And so that's what I want to tell you about now. When you focus your development and shipping your code around Git, that's been coined very recently by Alexis Richardson as Getups. Okay? So when we talk about Getups, it's the idea that there's no manual code going into production, you're pushing into Git, and that's triggering the whole life cycle. When you combine Getups and functions, you get OpenFaaS Cloud. Now that's that same experience that I showed you where you have your colorize, you can program in any language you like, but it has a lot more management to it. And that's important for teams like the one at Vision Bank and the one at BT, because I know when I asked in the room here, there's still some people that haven't used containers, and that is okay. So what this is really targeting is teams where you perhaps have some very technical people or team leads that will set this up for you, and then you can just concentrate on writing your code. Yeah, so it has an element of being managed. There's the ability to have multiple users, your personalized dashboard where you can see your functions and get some data about them, and then you've got the CI/CD built in. So as soon as you push code, it gets deployed for you. Nobody has to worry about a custom Jenkins configuration or how you're going to set up your Azure DevOps. Feedback comes immediately to you through GitHub or GitLab, and it will tell you if anything went wrong in your unit tests. You'll get it straight in the UI and all in one place. And there's a free community cluster where the multi-use element really comes in, where we've got that open for people to go and just put whatever they want on there, all through this mechanism. Now this is what the dashboard looks like. You see it's a little bit different from the regular OpenFaaS dashboard. If you can see through the sunshine here, we've got the name of the function, the endpoint that you can click off into, and then whether it's a private repo or not, and some of the data about how the function's been used already. When you do a commit, we're using the GitHub or GitLab, so if you need to be on premise, statuses and checks API to give you a tick next to each function. So we've got 3 functions that we'll see in this demo: move money, find out what is the total in a savings pot, and to register a new user. Yeah. So conceptually, what's going on? We're about to see a demo of this, but in essence, you have your developer workspace, your laptop, just like you've got on your laps now, and you might do fast line new that will give you your YAML file, your handler in JavaScript, and when you push that to a GitHub repo, everything is completely automatic. OpenFaaS Cloud will clone your repo. If it's private, it will use security to do that. It will build a Docker image, deploy it in your cluster, and you'll see it back on that dashboard in a few seconds. Now, this is really where we want to get to as an industry. There's more and more interest in this area about making it easier, because when you're not bogged down in the weeds, having to think about what server's going to do the build and all of this kind of stuff, you can focus on shipping your application. Now, I need a bit of your participation here to use this demo. I'm not going to show you my bank account or my credit card, but you trust me, this is going to be live. So I've got this app open on my phone already, and it's going to connect to Monzo. Monzo pitch themselves as the bank of the future, and they basically have an API. That's the main difference. So as soon as you spend something, you buy a coffee, it pops up on your phone. There's some similar banks to this. But Monzo's API is actually very easy to use, and in a very short period of time, I was able to construct a complete application around it. This is what we're going to do. So earlier today, I moved an amount of money from a main account into a charity pot. That's the total that we can spend in this room. We can't spend any more than that, I'm sorry. Then every time you click the button to register, you just need to use GitHub to do this. We're going to move an amount of money from the charity pot into the pledge pot, and at the end, it will go to the chosen charity. That makes sense? Yep. So it's going to be Great Ormond Street, Children's Hospital in London, or GOSH, and basically we just give this a shot. There's 3 ways that you can open this up. I've got it on my phone now. When you get on there, there's going to be a green button. It says Pledge Now. So I'm going to do it. Let's see if it's working. Yeah. So we've now got 50p in there. So we need a few more people to participate. I'll keep this open. So we're up to £4. These are the avatars, £4.50, of the people that have taken part. And this is literally coming out of my Monzo account now. If I open my notifications, you see all of these charity notifications going through, everybody that's clicked it. And it's completely live. It's up to £9. Okay. Well, you're going to see the link on the next slide if you're still trying to get onto it. I'll tell you how this works. It's quite hard to see with the sun on it, but you, the audience, have 3 things that you can do. You can log in with GitHub, you can view what pledges are there, and you can actually pledge. Right, so if you've already pledged, you're doing the view action now. Those 3 things are going through the Pledge app, which is a small Node.js, small Golang application I wrote. And that just does the login, the social login. That's all it does. And we store a username in a Postgres database just to know that you've registered. If you're using the cloud, it could be a relational database in the cloud. It's the same deal. So that's your register user function that handles that. Then there's a pledge total that adds up the values in the pot, and then there's the move money. And because the Monzo API is a little bit round and about, you move the money into an account from the pot and then back in through another API. But it's all pretty easy to use, and I was able to prepare this in a very short period of time. So if you need to create a serverless function with open source, this is a good example of how you can do that and make use of these services. Okay. Let's see if we have any more. So we've got £11.50 for Great Ormond Street. I think I could probably double that given the response. I'm sure they'll be really appreciative of it, so thank you. So just to sum up on OpenFaaS Cloud, what we saw, we've got this concept of a portable multi-user serverless. I'm not sure if there's anything else really like that right now. There's that developer native workflow that you might have been used to with the enterprise projects that you work on, where you're pushing code into a central place, your team CI is running, and it's getting deployed. But now you don't have to manage that or even think about it. Everything's done through automation. And you get that concept of being able to develop an idea all the way through to production and to release it. Right. This example is running on GKE, so I don't have any servers to worry about. If I need more capacity, I just set a parameter and it will go up and down as needed. So that is OpenFaaS Cloud. There's 3 ways that you can get involved to take a next action. You're all welcome to join the Slack community if you've got any questions that you don't want to ask in the group, you want to try it out. And the second way is to get into the workshop. The workshop has 12 self-paced labs that will get you from absolutely nothing to deploying like we saw just then at the beginning of the demo to building a GitHub issue bot that will tell you if issues are positive or negative and add labels to them. And finally, there's a talk tomorrow with Bart, and what he's going to explore there is how do you monitor your serverless functions, how do you get feedback, and he's going to go a bit deeper into Getups. So if you're interested in that, it's 3:35 to 4:20 tomorrow. Okay. All right, thank you very much.